All right, so moving on to the next segment, I'll be sharing my thoughts on the latest NFL head coaching hirings that have transpired lately in the National Football League. So I'll be going over the latest new hires that have filled in the vacant spots around the National Football League for teams that were looking for new head coaches. So we'll be starting off with the first team on the list, which is the Dallas Cowboys, hiring Brian Schottenheimer as their next head coach. So I just threw up in my mouth a little bit. I still can't believe that this happened. But the Cowboys have hired their former offensive coordinator and Brian Schottenheimer to a 4-year contract to be the next head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. Now, I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. This has to be one of the most frustrating moves that I've seen the Jerry and Stephen Jones do. And this has to be one of the most head-scratching moves in franchise history. I just watched the Eagles and the Commanders play in the NFC Championship game. Two NFC East rivals of the Dallas Cowboys play for a chance to go to Super Bowl 59. The Eagles are going. But if I'm Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones, how the hell does that not fire you up to make this Dallas Cowboys team compete and be where those two respective teams are, at least to an NFC Championship game? Something that you haven't been a part of in nearly 30 years, Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones. But the fact that the Dallas Cowboys missed out on going after Ben Johnson, going after Aaron Glenn, you missed out on Pete Carroll. I don't care if you talked or whispered to him, you missed out on them discussion or not. Mike Vrabel, same thing with Dion. You talked to him, you had discussions, you still missed out on them. And you end up doing a lazy-ass in-house hire with Brian Schottenheimer as your next head coach to be the Dallas Cowboys. Is this a joke? I mean, we don't have time to play games. We have some superstar talent that is good enough to get us to where we need to be. But we need the right personnel. We need the right head coach. We need the right moves to be made by the front office. And Brian Schottenheimer was our offensive coordinator for 2 years in Dallas under Mike McCarthy's coaching tree. But he did not call the plays for the last 2 years. It was Mike McCarthy. So realistically, what was this man doing for 2 years being on the sidelines for the Dallas Cowboys? I'm not sure what his job really was. And he's been in the NFL for a long time, over 20 years of experience. And he has failed at every top-tier unit. Failed as an offensive coordinator. Failed as a quarterback coach. How do you trust this guy with no head coaching experience to be the right man to lead the Cowboys where they need to be? And that's being in a Super Bowl, something they haven't done since I've been on planet Earth. And you know the worst thing about this is, if Brian Schottenheimer doesn't pan out in the first 6 games, let's just say we fire him in 6 games, now that the fact that we've hired Brian Eberflus as our defensive coordinator, we're going to have to go to that. This is not a fun time to be a Dallas Cowboys fan. And honestly, anybody out there watching and listening, if you want to switch teams, I don't think Cowboys Nation, America's fan base, would blame you, because this is despicable, disgusting. This is disgraceful to what the Dallas Cowboys used to be. We're just making hires and moves to be in the social media news, to be all over the sports analyst shows of First Take and on Fox Sports. What the heck? I don't know what we're doing, but I'm going to move on before I go really into what I more wanted to say. That's a different topic for a different day. Next, Aaron Glenn becoming the next head coach of the New York Jets. Now, the former defensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions has signed a 5-year deal to become the new head coach of the New York Jets. Now, I think this is a good hire by the Jets. I said a few months ago that the Jets needed somebody firm and there's somebody that could be a team builder, somebody that can motivate the guys, because they got a lot of talent, motivate them to be where they should be. And I said either Mike Vrabel or Aaron Glenn would be perfect hires for the New York Jets, and they got their guy in Aaron Glenn. And Aaron Glenn has done a good job with the Detroit Lions defense. Yes, they weren't the strongest units while he was the defensive coordinator, but the work that he's done, being with the defensive coordinator, especially with a lot of players that they had on IR injury reserve this year, I would say he's done a pretty good job, and he's filled out a perfect resume for a lot of teams that were pursuing him to be their next head coach. It was the New York Jets that got him, but I think Aaron Glenn's already showed characteristics of being a great leader as a defensive coordinator with the Lions, and he's going to show that with the New York Jets. I thought he had a pretty strong press conference that sold me that he is passionate about turning around the culture in the Big Apple for the New York Jets. And yes, it's good to talk the talk, but now it's time for him to walk the walk, because the Jets have not been in the playoffs for the last 14 years. They have not seen the light of day of playoff football since Mark Sanchez and Rex Ryan were doing the work there, getting them to AFC Championship games in the early 2010s. So he's got a lot of work to do, and he's got to lay the foundation down. And don't get me wrong, the roster still has talent. I mean, they got Breece Hall at running back, Garrett Wilson at wide receiver, Devontae Adams still at wide receiver, Quinyon Williams on the defensive line, Sauce Gardner at the cornerback position. He has spoken with Aaron Rodgers. We'll see if Aaron Rodgers commits to playing next year. But it'll be interesting to see what Aaron Glenn could do with the New York Jets. But I like the hire here, and I think he could have a bright future out there in the Big Apple. Now, next would be Pete Carroll going to the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, former Seahawks head coach Pete Carroll has signed a 3-year contract to become the next Raiders head coach. Now, I'm going to be honest, I was shocked that Pete Carroll was the one that was hired by the Las Vegas Raiders to become their next head coach. I know Pete Carroll was interested in becoming the Chicago Bears head coach. The Dallas Cowboys talked to Pete Carroll. I'm not buying that bullshit. But the fact that Tom Brady was really all in on Ben Johnson, they didn't get Ben Johnson. He went to Chicago, and then they quickly pivoted it to Pete Carroll, shows me that Tom Brady did have a lot of influence in the hire, bringing in Pete Carroll to Vegas. And Pete Carroll this is a good hire by the Raiders. It's just the age that it concerns me for Pete, but Pete is a proven winner on the big levels. He's a former national champion at college football with USC, former Super Bowl champion with the Seattle Seahawks, and he kept them relevant for the better part of the 2010s. It's interesting to see. It's going to be interesting to see how fast the Raiders could turn this around, because you're playing in a very competitive AFC West division that has the quarterbacks of Patrick Mahomes, Bo Nix, Justin Herbert, with some pretty good rosters that all three of those respective teams have. And not only that, but the head coaches of Andy Reid, Jim Harbaugh, Sean Payton. The Raiders are going to have to move quick if they want to compete out in this division. They got to get a quarterback. They definitely got to draft a quarterback or find one this offseason. You got to get a wide receiver to play along on the offense alongside Brock Bowers, who is their best offensive player at tight end. They got to retool the defense, retool the offensive line as well. They got to do the dirty work this offseason to make this team better. I'm not saying they got to be a competitive they got to be a championship contending team, but you got to keep them afloat with a division that is not going anywhere in the AFC West with everything that I just said. But Pete Carroll to the Raiders makes me happy to see, and hopefully the hire plays out in the right direction for them. And last but not least will be Liam Cohen being the new head coach for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, the former offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers has been named the new Jacksonville Jaguars head coach. Now, I'm not going to lie to you guys. I saw the video yesterday where Liam Cohen came in and did his press conference with the Jacksonville Jaguars. The man said, Duval! And he was so happy to be there. I don't know if he was trolling or not, but Liam Cohen decided to leave Tampa as the offensive coordinator, go be the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. It was a developing story because he decided to turn down the job until the Jacksonville Jaguars did some work in the front office, firing some people. Then he decided to take the job. So now he's fully committed to being the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, he was a good offensive coordinator with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this year. He brought the best out of Baker Mayfield, and arguably Baker Mayfield just had the best productive year of his NFL career. And also Liam Cohen, a lot of people don't remember that he was the offensive coordinator out in out in LA with the Rams under Sean McVay. He wasn't calling the plays, but he was still learning under boy genius Sean McVay. So he has turned out to be a really good play caller with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, being the offensive coordinator there for a year. And I want to see if he could bring the best out of these offensive players that the Jacksonville Jaguars still have on their roster. I mean, Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence has gone through Urban Meyer and Doug Peterson. This is going to be another head coach for Trevor Lawrence. But we're going to see if Liam Cohen can unlock the code to Trevor Lawrence to was labeled as a generational talent, but it has not looked like the same quarterback that he once did with Clemson in his collegiate days. So they still got Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, Brian Thomas, who just had a pretty good rookie year, wide receiver out of LSU. Evan Ingram still a tight end. The team does have offensive talent. They got to work on the defensive side of the ball and make some key adjustments to the offensive line as well, I think. But Liam Cohen is walking into a pretty good situation for being an offense guy. We're going to see if he calls the plays out there in Jacksonville, but those are my thoughts on the latest NFL coaching hirings in the National Football League.